Good afternoon. My name is Shama Banerjee. I'm the editor at Nimbus 90, and a warm welcome to all of you joining our webinar series, The 2021 Trends. This is the second episode in a four-part series where we explore the headline insights for the year ahead that have come out of our Digital Trends Report 2021, which you can find and download on our website. We'll be exploring everything in this series from investment to supporting your employees to evolving customer behavior and driving recovery strategies in 2021. But in this episode in particular, we are looking at the new work reality. I'm delighted to welcome our panelists for today. They are Phil Scully, the CIO of Costa, and Maurizio Pilu, who's the VP of Digital Innovation at Lloyd's Register. And we may also have John Calper, who's the former CTO of Student.com, joining us in a bit. So they will be sharing their thoughts on what remote working may look like and innovation, how that will look like in 2021. But thank you for joining us both. So before we dive in, I'd just like to remind everyone that if you have a question at any time, you can add it to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will get through as many as we can as they pop up, but please do just add those in as and when they come to you, and we will just answer them when we can. So let's kick off. Maurizio and Phil, I'd love to just invite each of you to introduce yourselves. Phil, if you want to go first.
Phil Scully, I'm the group CIO for Costa. I've been with Costa for 4 years. Prior to that, I was with the parent company, Whitbread, and clearly lots of work to do within that journey around ways of working, not just from a corporate point of view, but from a consumer point of view, and my remit is globally. So there's a lot of challenges and similarities with consumer trends globally.
Thanks, Phil. And Maurizio, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. My name is Mauricio Pirro, and I'm VP for Digital Innovations at Lloyd's Register, which is a professional services company working on engineering consultancy, working in sectors that are critical to our society, like transport, food supply chains, etc. And we are specialized in helping companies manage their risk, reducing accidents, safety, but also increasing performance. I've been with Lloyd's Register for 5 years, and prior to that, I was one of the co-founders of the Digital Catapult, and prior to that, venture capital, and we are going back many years now, I better stop. But I come from an R&D background, a researcher and R&D background, moved into venture capital, and then essentially technology executive roles in the past decade.
Fab, thanks both. Well, let's kick off then with this conversation. So this episode is all about the new work reality. What is the most important lesson that remote working in 2020 has taught us? Phil, if I come to you first for that.
The most important lesson, what, for me personally, or for...
I think for, well, both, for you personally, for organizations as a whole, what's the big thing that we can take away?
Me personally, stand up occasionally. It is literally look after yourself and be kind to other people, because you don't know what's going on. People are homeschooling, they've got family that they care about, they've got different circumstances. If both people are working, it could be space. If it's children homeschooling, it could be devices. There's so many different challenges for people to just turn up and remote work because of everything else that's going on. So I think that just being aware of that, being adaptable, being kind, don't put meetings in at 6 o'clock at night when people have been on meetings for 10 hours a day already. And if you're one of the people on meetings for 10 hours of the day already, that's a long haul flight. In a long haul flight, you would have stood up, you would have walked around, you would have moved. Take some of those disciplines and think about that. And for the rest of it, it is just, there's so many changes still to come. There's so many things still going to be ironed out, thought about. That adaptability and that flexibility of what we do, how we do it, and how we approach things is going to be crucial for the coming months.
And I think Maurizio, from your standpoint, with I guess you're leading innovation in an organization. What are the lessons you've learned there?
I think okay, there are obviously personal stories and so on. I think the main lesson is how adaptive everyone has been really, how much we adapted to this new reality. I mean, clearly the novelty is wearing off, I think. Like the first few months, hey, no commuting. But I think the novelty is wearing off. I mean, quite a few people are craving for, a return to face-to-face brainstorming, whiteboarding. So that's okay. But yes, the adaptability has been remarkable. And what is very interesting, we work in a heavy B2B environment. Obviously, Costa is a consumer brand, and I like to say one of my favorite coffees out there are Costas. Um, and
Thank you.
no, seriously, a double espresso is spectacular. But in a B2B environment, kind of the dynamics are very different. And what we discovered is that both we are a supplier to many clients that manage infrastructure, run shipping companies, and so on. So whereas at the beginning it was like, oh my God, my supplier has gone remote. Now everyone has gone somehow remote to one level or another, and so somehow it has been normalized. Okay, so the fact that you know somebody who's fulfilling a contract for you is working from home and cannot visit you, and you find other ways of fulfilling that obligation and making your client happy and so on, it has been normalized. And I think it took about 3 to 6 months to be normalized. So now, because now almost everybody's doing it, then there is no more, if you like, barrier to doing that. That said, though, there are some sectors where physical presence is important. Now, both in consumer, as we see in the situation in the retail market, or the hospitality market, where without going in person, you're just not making money. In our sector as well, when we are working with companies that manage supply chains or big pieces of equipment, ships and so on, this is a very physical industry. These are physical industries, okay? And so what I've seen what we have noticed and we have seen from the market is actually trying to figure out a way of doing what you were doing before without sending people and having fewer people. So managing without people, which has spurred quite a lot of innovation in, I guess, in thinking about different ways of using technology for doing things that required physical presence before. So the adaptability has been unbelievable. Okay.
And I think, just to kind of draw on what you've said there, Maurizio, one of the biggest challenges that organizations have said for as their kind of top three challenges for 2021 is this adapting to the changing working environment and keeping that conversation going. So how do you think that businesses can handle, this potential return to the office, this hybrid model that some organizations are looking at? How can this new adaptation period of kind of coming out of lockdown be made easier than that, which was so sudden in March 2020? I don't know, Maurizio, if you have any thoughts on that.
I think the return to the office, office-based work, working from home, that's probably the smoothest of the changes. Okay, I don't think that will be. In fact, actually, many office workers before, many of them, especially in the UK, were doing quite a lot of work from home. It's actually the non-office based jobs which I think are gonna be the one that suffer the most, and probably will have to adapt to a new normality in a different way. So it's not basically me going to the office is catching a train, putting a suit, catching a train, going to a desk. Yes, I'm not meeting people working from home, but it's actually it's a type of work that I think can flip from one to the other. But if you take about if you think about other roles, they have to change entirely how they serve clients and things like that. That's a bit more complicated. So there would be, I think there is a bit more reflections on those type of jobs compared to just the, if you like, the office-based roles.
Phil, what are your thoughts on that kind of moving out of the office, and how businesses can help their employees adapt to that change?
I think there has to be a measure of flexibility and adaptability. There has to be a measure of trying things and making, seeing if they work, seeing if they don't, and everybody's got to adjust, whether it's an organization or an individual, and whether it's a working style of going to an office or that commuting behavior. Things shift, and it will be as fundamental as booking a desk, because hot desking is maybe a thing of the past, through to a different way of looking at the people's work patterns on a daily basis. And I think Maurizio was right. We pre-lockdown, pre-coronavirus, people kind of working from home 1 day a week and trying to balance a commute route. If you've got that now, there's almost a future where that's turned on its head, potentially, and people are coming into the office 1 day a week rather than working from home 1 day a week. And what does that do? And that may do things differently for different teams. If you're in an IT team used to working with offshore companies, or a finance team where you can work remotely 4 days a week, it might be a very different way of working. It might be a very different future to a product innovation team or a product creation team, where you absolutely have to be in a room. It is really hard, regardless of how good these modern tools are, like Miro and others, that I'm sure we've all been exposed to something similar of online whiteboarding and online collaboration. Really doesn't have that same impact, doesn't have that same sense as being in the room with the whiteboard, standing up and creating, or being collaboratively creating in the same physical space. The feedback has been, it's good, but it's still not quite there from that point of view. So I think you can't just apply the future to an organization and say, that's it. I think different teams within organizations are going to adjust and adapt differently as they go through this.
Definitely. I mean, Maurizio, I'd just like to draw on your innovation experience there from what Phil's saying. What has been your experience with trying to foster that collaboration remotely with innovation teams?
Yeah, we got inside the Lloyd's Register, there are 3 innovation teams for each business area. I am I'm working on the digital side, but also we are running a technology accelerator. Okay. That is very client facing. Okay, all our innovation is very client facing, and that's why innovation, we have to look at the internal side of innovation, so how a team is collaborating, but also quite a lot of innovation requires interaction with clients or suppliers, and so these two are very different. So in terms of team dynamics, clearly Miro, though I like it, Miro, similar tools, I'm using PowerPoints, for example, to capture, as a virtual whiteboard. But the thing is, it's not the same. And also the when we are in execution, maybe it's okay. When we are in new idea generation or planning, that's really where you really miss the physical presence. Okay, but that's the internal side. Well, somehow you kind of get over it. When it gets complicated is when there are other parties involved in your innovation process, whether that is a client or you have to do a field trial or things like that. And that is a different league, because broadly speaking, it's outside of your control. The client itself might be firefighting or trying to get over the disruption. And so I think I'll encourage everybody to think about internal and external dynamics, which are very, very different. The external one has suffered much more than the internal one in our case, in the sense that it's simply a bit difficult to do business with clients. Those workshops where you're designing a new product, a new idea, or trying to install things to test them and things like that. That said, I'm amazed how much people still want to do it. Okay, so everybody's absolutely trying their best to actually keep things going. But also, if I may say, Phil, maybe you have similar experience, but also certain ways of circumventing the limitations posed by not being able to travel or physical presence. I mean, for example, there are situations where the data that you need to use for innovation is very confidential. It cannot leave a site. So in order to work with that data, you actually have to go there on site and use the data that is cannot leave your firewall. That's an example of a barrier that one might encounter, just a data science project, and then you have this thing that you actually need physical presence to be able to manipulate the data. And how we have been able to overcome that with working with partners with certain solutions that completely did without that. Now, because we had the need, we kind of looked into how to solve it. And so basically, when there is will, obviously there is always a solution. And I think it has created, paradoxically, digital technology is starting to be used more to do digital innovation. So the digital innovators are becoming more innovative in how they use the tools, and that's very good to see, very nice to see.
Definitely. I think one thing that is interesting from what you've just said is that I guess one of the big stats that came out of this year's report is when respondents were asked what are the biggest technology challenges with working from home, firstly they said visibility across teams. Secondly, they said inadequate collaboration tools, and thirdly they said lack of timely access to data. So I think that really kind of echoes what you've just been saying, Maurizio, in terms of that collaboration is really hard, and actually getting that data is really hard as well. In terms of that first point, that visibility, Phil, I don't know if you have any thoughts on why does visibility seem to be such a tech issue? What are we missing here?
What the pandemic has done is that it's allowed people to be creative, right? It's given people permission to look at what the barriers are and how to go around them. And whether that's a digital innovator or whether that's your local store, the fact that all of your local businesses are now fired up click and collect or home delivery, and we've got loads of local examples just where I am. I'm sure it's the same for everybody. They've seen the barriers, they've seen their business challenges, and they've really adapted and transformed the way they've met the consumer. And I think that comes from the visibility of seeing the problem and doing something about it. I think we've got no end of challenges, and a lot of them aren't corporate challenges. I must be no end of people in my role who have had the technology is not working. It's the home internet connection that's not working, not the company technology that's not working. It's the fact that for the first time there's 5 people now, or 4 people now, or 7 people now in that house trying to do online meetings, do online homeschooling, and that's putting pressure on home technology and being visible as you would want to be from a home point of view. I think it will be a case of adapting and adjusting and taking permission to be creative at how those adjustments and adaptations happen.
And to bring this back to innovation, I think, because one of the big things that we are seeing from this survey is that innovation has sped up. We had 71% of respondents this year agreeing with the statement that they've become more innovative in the last 12 months than they have been in the last 5 years. So I think there's just this interesting tension that obviously innovation is becoming a lot harder, like both of you have outlined, but actually the need for innovation to speed up is also there. So Maurizio, what's your response to those data points?
I think well, in obviously everybody can read about stuff and have their own personal experience. So on both levels, I think your survey is probably accurate. Innovation comes from trying to solve a problem, and we know what the problems are, and people are incredibly resourceful when a problem is presenting itself. But there is also another element, which is I think if this pandemic happened 10 years ago, it would have been far more brutal in terms of being able to carry on activity. So somehow, maybe in 10 years from now will be even less. But what I'm trying to say is that the widespread availability of certain tools made essentially the transition a bit smoother than it could have been. It could have been much worse. Imagine 10 years ago, we're old enough to remember when, you had to be in an actual office to hook a cable inside a machine to actually access your email. 10, 15 years, maybe, Phil? 15 years? Well, depending on maturity. But if this was 10 years ago, even 10 years ago, it would have been a lot of trouble. And the dynamics would have been entirely different. So somehow the world was kind of, at least to some extent, ready. But the interesting question is, how can it be more ready next time? Okay, not only with vaccine development and all those kind of things, but in the world of work, how can we be more ready next time? So think about where we were 10 years ago, where we are now, where we could be in 10 years from now. And it's an interesting thought exercise. And it's not about virtualizing humans. I don't think humans will ever be, I hope not, everybody becoming avatars. No, it's not about that. It's resilience. It's about resilience of the economic infrastructure of a country. And that, I think, will occupy academics and policymakers for many years to come after this pandemic, and see how we can handle it better next time. Less economic shock, more people still working, and so on. Personally, I think it can only get better. In the industrial world, you will have sensors technologies, more automation, and so on, that will need less physical presence, more use of digital tools, etc. Flip side, of course, is that this transformation also makes people uncomfortable. All of us, that our job might become redundant at some point. But thing is, if we just focus on the pandemic, not the bigger picture, I think we, again, it would be an interesting exercise, maybe for another webinar of yours, to think about how a pandemic will be handled in 10 years' time, like future gazing.
Phil, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think Maurizio is making some really good points. I don't know how innovative we have genuinely been. Right? Video conferencing technology and collaboration technology isn't new news. It didn't just appear in 2020. We've had it for years. The fact that we've never used it has been brought into focus. We've never used it in a widespread way, and that's created some challenges as everybody started to rely on this technology. It's forced the technology to evolve. So we've got to look at that. And I think what's happened is we've been talking about digital transformation for years, and the global pandemic last year and what continues now has brought into sharp relief that we haven't transformed yet. It's more than just a website or a mobile app. And the data visibility piece, if you've got a business process that's been relying on Excel spreadsheets, step one, download vast amounts of data to a spreadsheet, or step two of the process is to send your customer vast amounts of paperwork for them to physically sign. That process has fundamentally come under immense pressure with lockdown, and may even have created a huge Achilles heel in the whole value proposition for your business. And digital transformation has got to be looking at these areas and saying, right, well, if you wind it forward 10 years and we're back in a, that future world, digital transformation would have cleared those processes to be accessible from anywhere, virtual, not human avatars, but that cloud virtualization and that capability of that process to exist, outside of an office, from home working, from mobile, from remote, from an international site, from a mobile. Digital transformation has got to evolve and take into consideration every element of the business that faces into the consumer or the customer or the B2B relationship. And that, I think, is the biggest change coming down the track.
I mean, in terms of there's the clear necessity, Phil, like you've just outlined there. In terms of organizations that are trying to get on this journey now, but they are struggling because they're almost a bit of a chicken and egg situation. They're not set up, therefore they can't get going. What would your advice be to those people?
Start small and iterate. And it is literally, if you look at how creative some of these businesses have been, it is knowing what you need to do to meet the customer, to keep the promise. And even if it's your local pub all of a sudden doing home delivery for Sunday roast, which they can do now on the back of connecting themselves to anything like Deliveroo or Uber Eats or Just Eat, all the way through to your local garden centre or supermarket being able to deliver to your home through their own managed logistics. There are processes and things that can be creatively achieved to meet the consumer, to extend your business and evolve those and look at what's available. Don't be afraid to learn from others around you, because the chances are somebody somewhere has tried it and either made it successful or learn how to make it successful because they've made mistakes with it. Don't be afraid to learn from that and use online forums, online networks, partnerships to extend yourself in that way. I think those are probably headlines for me.
Maurizio, do you have any kind of tips there as well?
I mean, it's clearly this pandemic has caused a huge shock to systems. I think the way I look at it is waves of investment or change. Okay, so I think well, it's hard to tell, to be honest. I was reading an article the other day that in the UK, essentially, cash companies, certain companies are actually not investing right now, and they're hoarding cash. Okay, which presumably will be investing after the pandemic is over. To start operating again fully, etc. Hiring, maybe, hopefully. No, but the thing I'm thinking about is digital transformation. So I think there will be companies who realize they were not quite ready, and I think we can probably anticipate a wave of investment to get even more company ready. Not for the next pandemic, but ready for a permanent change in the way people buy and work and so on. So it's not really pandemic proofing. I think maybe people will have had enough, and just keep their fingers crossed. Now it's resilience, but also permanent changes of behaviors. That will probably drive a shift in investment, and clearly digital transformation, doing away with paper and things that Phil mentioned. That I think might be top of the list for investment. So I'll put a fiver maybe on a wave of investment also by small firms, which might hopefully increase productivity in the UK, which is very low, internationally quite low compared to the best in class. And so it might turn out to be a positive thing. If you actually look at the history of pandemics and big disasters, they're always followed by a massive renewal. Big fire of London, big fire of New York. I mean, things change dramatically, and it's hard to foresee what will change exactly. But I think digital transformation is one of those that might be top of the list. Digitizing your business more.
Definitely. I think that's a really interesting point there. And it's something that came through in the conversations surrounding the report this year, is just that sense of what's the collective muscle memory going to look like? Like you said earlier, Maurizio, about what might it look like if we had another pandemic in 10 years' time? How would businesses respond? And I guess, Phil, just to draw on what you were saying, go on. I feel like you had a point. Did you?
I like them. I don't think it's about the next pandemic and that kind of doom mongering. You know, I live near the M25. For a year, there's been no queue. There's been no traffic jam on the M25. That any time I've crossed it, it has been moving. Now, I don't know how much less traffic there is on the M25, but anecdotally, it doesn't queue anymore. And yet, every single day before the pandemic, there was a traffic queue. Now, the environmental impact of less commuting and less traffic is enormous. Whether you say it's air quality, whether you say it's the money that would have been spent managing those roads networks and the wear and tear gets spent on other things. There are some huge upsides changing the way we work, and they've been visible in just the year that we've changed our way of work. And I think there's going to be a general reluctance to go back to traffic jams, to spend 3 or 4 hours of your day in a traffic jam when you could do something else. Maybe work, maybe walk your dogs, maybe spend time with your family, whatever that thing is. Everybody hopefully has learned that time is precious, that there are things in life slightly more important than sitting in a traffic jam. And so I think there might be, and Maurizio's point is super valuable in terms of from every global disaster, after the whatever Wall Street crash or Spanish flu, the period of rejuvenation has been significant. And I think looking at that momentum, looking at that purpose is got to be a little bit more broad and a little bit more focused than just in 10 years' time for the next pandemic.
Definitely. Maurizio, you're
agreed. No, agreed. Okay, I agree. Yes, I agree. The focus on the next pandemic will, I think there are policymakers and healthcare professionals that are preparing the health infrastructure maybe for the next one. But no, the other change is the permanent changes that are, I think, are going to stay with us, soon after this is over. But we don't know exactly what they are, clearly. But some ideas, maybe.
An interesting thing to think about. We are getting a couple of questions through our Q&A, which we will come to in a second. But just a reminder if you've joined us kind of later on in the session, there's that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can be adding those questions in. And I'm just going to pull up one of those now from Gabrielle Palmer. He's asking, it was mentioned that better solutions come with cloud services, which means being more dynamic and innovative. For this instance, and the example provided, the use of Excel forms to collect information and data. My question would be, which tool would you recommend, which might have similar functionality, but more dynamic and adaptable for different industry environments? I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that.
I mean, look, there's no end of tools out there that are linked to the big organizations, whether you say Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, SaaS, that there's reporting and data suites that allow you to present dashboards that can be consumed, data sets that can be manipulated, cubes that can be drilled down into. I think depending on what you want to do and how you want to deliver it to your population, there's probably a combination of all of them. I think the more data you can make available to your business, I think the better served the business can be in terms of owning their decisions and their decision areas. I'm familiar and use the Microsoft Azure and Power BI suite within Costa. That's a good tool set. It's cloud based. It gives you flexibility to land on different devices in different ways for different parts of the business. And I think, looking and using tools that are out there, like Gartner, like Infotech, to look at the marketplace, look at market leaders versus innovation leaders, and trying a few. And the businesses out there would welcome the call to work with you in terms of a proof of concept or a pilot, in my experience, and just try a few and see what fits. But there's a lot of different capabilities out there.
Thanks, Phil. So just to finish off with, we've just had a question come through about empathy in the organisation, so I'll come on to that in a second. But just to finish off with the more people-focused side of things, one of the biggest kind of priorities to improving working life for our business leaders this year was a greater separation between home and work. And I think I guess it's the flip side of the positives we've been talking about there, which is that we don't have the commute, we've got more time, but there is that separation issue. So I don't know if either of you have thoughts on how organizations can encourage that greater separation between home and work.
Look, it's difficult, and it does depend on the organization and the organizational culture. It's difficult if you've got international teams, and it's really easy to end up with an extended day, because you're talking to different time zones internationally. And so the watch out is for me, set some time aside. Make sure it's known that it's okay to have a lunch break if that's what people want to do. Make sure it's okay, just little things. Instead of having 1 hour meetings, have 45-minute meetings. Right? What people do with that 15 minutes, it doesn't matter. It's up to them. But that's choiceful. But if they want to go for a walk, they want to get some fresh air, they'll stand up, whatever that is, give people that time back. And then just, if you're working at weekends, just things on email footers that says, I choose to work at weekends. I do not expect a response. There's things that you can do to make sure that people have those choices, have that flexibility, and stick to working hours. If you've been in a business that typically people started to commute home at 5, 6, 7, then why are you putting in a meeting at 6, 7, 8? Because that's not realizing what other people's circumstances could be. So there's different things, and it's worth trying a few out, getting some feedback, talking to your teams to see what works and what fits.
Very good point. Several people commented that remote working has actually naturally generated more meetings, because things you could do in like 30 seconds, you have to put something in the diary. So that's one of the it's a bit of counterintuitive thing, right? So you're always online and so on, but actually it has created more need for meetings. I think my organization, I'm very lucky, and my organization generally is very family friendly and on the sort of things extremely sort of forward looking in terms of balancing time. That said, I think all of us are. Well, I'm not very good at blurring. I'm blurring my free time with work during the week, simply because there is always something to do and so on. So what I've tried to do recently in the past 2 months is definitely not take any work meetings after 5:30. And nothing before 9:30, for instance. Okay, so to give a little bit of an air gap, trying to reduce the meeting sizes with all the colleagues, and starting to use other tools that don't require actually meetings, like Trello and other things that allow synchronization without meetings. And that, because it's probably the meetings. One of the pressures on time is the meetings. A lot of meetings are coming up 6, 7 o'clock. So that has improved things a little bit, but it's a challenge for everybody. Everybody I'm talking to is finding it quite difficult to draw the line. And so very simple trick, like, okay, no meetings after 5:30, old-fashioned things, or the lunch break you mentioned, Phil, actually do work. And they're very simple. You just block the diary, and that hour you're just, sort of working. Old-fashioned works. I don't believe in sophisticated methods there. It's just maybe best to draw the line, and that's it. Okay, but I'm not that good myself. I'm trying to discipline myself, especially New Year resolution, if you like.
Maybe something that we can all try for Lent instead.
That's right.
Well, thank you both so much for the thoughts that you've shared there and the tips. I think it's been really valuable to hear that. So thank you both so much for contributing to the conversation.